It's great to be here, to be finally here. You know, we were supposed to be here, as we know, 6 months ago, but thank you too to Harper, and we're incredibly proud to be partners and part of the School of Sustainable Food and Farming, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along later today. The purpose of the conference really is to be able to take a bit of a moment in time though to say thank you, to acknowledge what's been done, but also to acknowledge what we know and what we don't yet know and what we hope to be able to discover together. So I really hope that by the end of these next 2 days, or for however long you can be part of our time together, that everybody does genuinely go home with something different, something new, like all good workshops, some action or something that they want to take away from the conference to influence future behaviour. And of course, 6 months ago, we wouldn't have been having a slide like this. You know, we have to absolutely take a moment to acknowledge just the unprecedented times that we're all living in, and we're all having to cope with and all think about at the moment. I mean, nobody, I don't think, could have predicted where we were going to be now, and so even more, I sort of like thank you all for coming together and taking some time out of your day to think about net zero. As Morrisons, we have tried to be able to do what we can to listen and support. I'm sure you probably all think there's more that we can do. We're also always open and trying to think about listening, but the money that we put into the pig price in March and the special premiums that we keep sort of like awarding in the egg sector hopefully go some way towards that, but those important conversations and working together is absolutely vital. And of course, it isn't just farmers who are feeling pinch, which is what makes it so difficult at the moment. I just thought it was really interesting to pull together this particular slide, which the British Retail Consortium have published, and they come out basically every month. And this sort of shows the last 6 months, as you can see here, in terms of food sales as a 3-month average. And for those of you who are fast readers, you can sort of see this on the right-hand side there, the spike upwards that we're sort of seeing in April, May is much more attributed to food price inflation than it is about customer confidence necessarily coming back. We're still seeing customer confidence at an extremely low level, obviously confidence associated with their willingness to spend. And I think has often been said, you know, going into the autumn with rising energy prices, customers are going to find this even more difficult. So we're still in this incredibly tight time about input prices and customer confidence really pulling apart from each other. And so wondering how we can work together is therefore absolutely essential to be able to ride this through and keep, as Ken said, providing really great quality British food that we can all have now, but also in the generations to come. But it's not as if we weren't in a period of change anyway. We're already, as the next sort of 10 years, well, next 8 years now, up to sort of 2030, an incredibly focused and challenging time for agriculture. Of course, we've got the Agricultural Act and Environment Act, both of which are bringing together pieces of legislation, but absolutely about the sort of transition away from the single farm payment into other elements and schemes that the government are launching, as you will all be extremely aware. We have got the climate, nature and biodiversity crisis that we're all living through at the moment, and how we respond to that is absolutely essential. But, you know, there's crises by the dozen, as you sort of say, as we talked about the cost of living and cost of farming crisis, and that important need for food security. But amongst all of that, and despite customers' real nervousness, we still have a customer base who's increasingly connected with their food and interested in where their food comes from. And we saw that particular spring up in COVID times, and customers having more time to think about, appreciate and thank the farmers and the food producers that brought food to their tables all the time, and quite rightly so. But that customer need for transparency and reassurance that food is affordable but in balance with welfare, environment and health is certainly something that after this crisis is over we can see customers absolutely returning to, and indeed some of them have not left it even now. But we're here obviously as a conference time to talk about net zero. This is our net zero conference, the time for us to get together on this particular topic. And so really when net zero was first mentioned in my sort of like real cognizance anyway by Minette Batters in 2019 from the NFU, and the NFU had that commitment to work together towards greenhouse gas emissions net zero by 2040, we listened and we really admired. You know, this was about trying to sort of face into the difficult things that were facing agriculture at the time. All the naysayers and all the people who were sort of putting agriculture as the devil of the environment, you know, this is a way of saying, actually, you know, we've got a great story to tell and we can do something about it and we can all make changes. And I think that was really what influenced our own position as Morrisons. We were often, and still are, getting asked about how we're going to face into the climate crisis, how we're going to address the important balance of emissions from food, and without sort of like ignoring them. And we have a lot of pressure that says, are you going to sort of suggest that you're going to sell less meat? Are you going to have a reduction in diets? And for us, it never felt necessarily the right thing to do. It was about understanding the already fantastic work that goes on farms, telling that story better, being able to evidence that story better as well. And I think the data and the evidence behind it is part of what we've all been doing, and obviously we'll be hearing a bit more of as we move through the conference a bit later on today. So it is still really important, as we're talking about, and customers will emerge out of these difficult times, and we want to be ready to be able to provide them with those fantastic British products. So behind all of these overarching strategies, some of you may have seen this before, but we have our own ambition, our own plan for Morrisons agriculture and what sustainable farming actually means. And we see this as 4 different pillars, really. So one is about, all to really back up that whole piece of sustainable growth from British food from farms we know and trust. There's the nature positive farming, which cares for the world around us, which is kind of really what net zero is all part of. Net zero is a ladder up to that whole overall sustainable farming piece. It's essentially about great stockmanship, because whilst we have had such a lot of discussion about environment in recent times, animal welfare still remains a very important part for customers. We'll come on to that a little bit later. It's about, as we talked about, building connections, how we can tell our story better, and we certainly have a very big role to play in that as a retailer, as having that access to customers and different stakeholders. But of course, it's also about agriculture resilience and financial sustainability. You know, we can't move forward at all if we haven't got businesses that are going to be returning something. So we do need to make sure that those 4 pillars are working in balance with each other. So just going into a little bit more detail about sustainable farming. You know, some of the things on the sort of right-hand side of the slide show you the often graphics that are bandying around social media, some of which have better impact than others. In terms of, you know, the particularly towards ruminant agriculture, but not necessarily just that, between soil use, between all the responsibility of agriculture about the climate crisis. And then we have recent things like, you know, many of you might have seen in the news last week, New Zealand planning to tax their cow and cattle and sheep farmers on methane emissions. So we have a very sort of focused political global agenda looking at how we tackle climate, and we want to be able to help get there by making reductions, or we often say in this project, as low as you can go. How low can the emissions on the farm be? We're always going to produce emissions, we're producing a biological food product, but how low can they go? And then when you've got that balance part, how high can the opportunity to sequestration become until you become collectively as a net zero position? And it is that collective action. You know, we have never ever set a target for each single farm that we supply into us as Morrisons to be a net zero position. It's an impossible ask, and it's something that not every farm would be right for their own farm business to do so. However, what we do want to understand is how we can work collectively to be able to benefit each other. And some of I will do in my second presentation is going to look a little bit more at that holistic system. And there is an element, not entirely, but there is an element, of course, about reducing emissions, also being about increasing efficiency and hopefully reducing cost and in the system too, which is incredibly important at this time. But as sequestration, not always, but can involve more costs. That's why this focus on taking low and not just using your offsets is an absolute vital place. And I think on the topic of offsets, it's just probably worth saying too that as Morrisons, we are absolutely committed to not going and buying a load of offsets abroad to sort of offset our emissions. It's about understanding what goes on within the whole farm footprint. And again, that's going to be something that we're going to be hearing from a little bit later on this morning as well. So we've started basically 4 different approaches to sort of thinking about net zero. So yeah, some of you will see some nice pictures of yourself. Thank you very much, Matthew, looking fine there. So we've been talking about different ways that you can sort of start to try and tackle this. And for us, it was absolutely essential that you don't set a target and walk away, but actually the whole piece of work that we wanted to do is about how we work with all of you and we learn from each other, hopefully. So we want to, you know, the first bit, we've got like a 4 eyes approach to this. The first one is about inspiring through innovation. So we'll hear about a little bit tomorrow about our projects that we've been working on at Queen's University Belfast, looking at using seaweed as a methane inhibitor. Incredibly interesting, really inspiring, and a way to be able to help lower those methane emissions. And that sort of innovation element is absolutely essential to thinking about net zero and long-term sustainable farming. But Matthew came to us a couple of years ago now, having been to conferences by a company called Better Origin, and Photos will be with us tomorrow, looking at how we could take potentially food waste and turn that into insects to reduce soya. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a bit later on. And then Photos is here tomorrow from Better Origin. It's really all about investments where we can make. We don't have a very big budget at all as Morrisons for research, so it's really about where we can make targeted investments to help inspire creative thinking and to help us all want to be able to move forward. So it doesn't feel like it's just hard work, but there are certain elements that can inspire us to make a difference. The second element is about informing and information through ideas sharing, which is part of why we're here today, and knowledge and skills training as well. As we've referenced already, we're here now part of the School of Sustainable Food and Farming. Incredibly proud to be part of this, and thank you very much indeed to McDonald's and the NFU, who are co-founders and co-partners of this school. You know, this is a really important place to be able to help take the whole agriculture industry forward, thinking about consistency in messages, consistency in training outputs, consistency in research, how we can help make practical steps to make that difference between net zero and sustainable farming. It's also about how we implement different ideas and action plans. And actually one of the things we've been working for, so I'll just flick back a bit there, we've really populated by the farmers in this room and online, a part of our Blueprints and Project Farms pool. So we've got Tim and Paul, who are Blueprint beef farmers, who you will see both in live people and also in posters around the event as well. But you know, we're working really closely with Tim and Paul. We're both sitting on the same row actually, which is quite nice. At either ends, it's like a very balanced place to really sort of focus in on those two farms in particular. And we did choose beef farms for a reason. Beef is really difficult to put our emissions into, you know, particularly suckler beef, and we want to be able to not shy away from that, but really look into it and understand how we can work with that whole farm footprint to make a difference. But it's not just about doing it in beef, it's obviously about doing it in all the sectors that we're buying into manufacturing. And so today here we have got all of those sectors representatives, so beef, pork, lamb, eggs and potatoes and root vegetables and soft fruit. It's really great to have all those different sectors coming together. The third element is about implementation, and more importantly, implementing action plans that make a difference. We spent quite a lot of time in the first sort of like year, 15 months of the project working with Map of Ag, and we'll hear from Hugh a bit later on this morning, looking at that balance of emissions and sequestration, really understanding how we can get that granular perception about what goes on farm, that granular information, so we can help then make informed approaches and informed ways of wanting to make changes that are right for you and your farm. And whilst we talk about Tim and Paul being blueprint beef farmers, there is no such thing as a blueprint. There is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all model for net zero and sustainable farming. It's absolutely about what was the right thing for you in your farm. So one of the things that I think has been really helpful through the Map of Ag work is developing that KPI report, you know, understanding, well, what can you do that's different? And obviously there's one for beef, but there's one coming into every single sector as well. I've got one for lamb, one for pigs, and moving into all sectors too. It is really, really about not just measuring, but about setting those action plans to make a difference. And then the fourth element is about incentivisation. We do also recognise that it's important to incentivise production to make a difference. And so at Beef Expo a couple of weeks ago, we announced our intention to sort of have now a sustainable beef and lamb scheme for farmers, which we'll be working with the first retailer to work with Red Tractor's new environment module to help assess this. So it'll give, again, an independent and consistent way of managing and thinking about environment going forward. Really, all the work that we're already doing for net zero, but in a sort of an overall wrapper. And in return for that, beef and lamb farmers will be getting sort of free advice on carbon emissions and animal nutrition and biodiversity, as you can see here. So a package of measures and discounts of products and services which are going to be building. And again, you know, payment premiums, which we're going to announce as we go through. So we're starting off with dairy beef, a 10p a kilo premium paid for dairy beef based on a sustainable diet, but it isn't absolutely about only doing that piece. It's about understanding what's the right premium for a suckler, what's the right premiums for store finishers, what does that look like, and how can we importantly add value throughout the chain in time as well. Other sectors, of course, are being worked through. You know, we are sort of thinking about how this is relevant for everybody in the main, and we already have set a premium for net zero eggs as well. But what about engaging customers in the long term? I mean, do customers really care? And are they going to change their buying habits so that, are they really all that bothered about it? And you might sort of say, no, not really. And to a degree, there's a certain amount of customers will expect us just to do the right thing and get it right for them. And customers, they do tell us, and Wendy just gave me a little flag warning, so I'm going to zip through these little bits before. But they do tell us that they're very keen about supporting British farmers and making a difference. But then I look at the example that we've done from our 4 Farmers range. So we launched 4 Farmers, which is in milk, but also now in eggs, in 2015. We gave customers the option if we're going to pay 10p a litre extra for any milk, should they wish to do so. And that, since we launched it in 2015, has generated an additional £20 million, which has gone straight back to farmers to make differences on their farm. I sort of think that is an example of showing you how customers will sometimes choose to make a difference. And so it is an interesting thing to consider. So in summary, we as retailers, we are first and foremost a customer-facing, customer-answering business. Without customers, we're not going to be here at the end of the day. But we are incredibly proud of our position as British Farming's direct biggest supermarket customer. It's a position we take very, very seriously and very responsibly, and trying to think very carefully about what that means for the future of agriculture. And that's why it's so important to listen to all of you, but to listen to also wider stakeholders to understand how we move forward together. We certainly can't get there alone, which is why it's so great to have the example today and over tomorrow as well, but all the different partners that we're working with to be able to help make that difference. Now then, I'm just going to have a quick few bits of, I'm not going to do Q&As for my bit here, but we are going to do something as we go along. So I'm just going to have a quick bit of housekeeping, and then I shall look forward to handing over to Michael, who is going to be joining us online from his family holiday. So I do have to say thank you very much, Michael. That is going above and beyond the call of duty. But housekeeping, we've got a really packed agenda today and tomorrow. Hopefully Sophie and Wendy have now sort of gathered you into different work streams for this afternoon. And so you know where you're going. We'll then meet at the end of the day, and we're finishing off today with a hog roast. You might have seen the marquee tent on the front lawn as you came through, so we'll have a hog roast before everybody either stays over ready for tomorrow or has to leave to go home, depending on your day. So we look forward to doing that. We will also have time for Q&As at the end of most sessions, and so we have got some roving mics here which will sort of like dash around, and we will try and use those roving mics because we have got people joining us online who will be able to hear so much better if we do that through a microphone. And I can't forget that Woodheads launched their Twitter yesterday. Very exciting. I think we're up to 25 followers now. 150, blimey, that's gone up since this morning. So we've got the opportunity to be even more. And I think we're very proud that Minette followed us about 6:30 this morning. So, we're going for lots of different people following, which is great. So part of the Twitter crowd as well. But then just very, very, very quickly before I hand over to Michael, a man of our huge admiration for. I've worked with Michael for a really long time, both before I joined Morrisons and my last job, and it's really, he has often inspired me to understand how we can try and make a difference within ruminant agriculture. But I just really want to do some thank yous too. I want to say thank you to every speaker who's going to be involved in either a presentation or a workshop later on today. We really do rely on that collective brain power, that collective creative thought and expertise, most importantly, to get us there. We're enthusiasts at Morrisons about things, but we're not experts, and so we do rely on expert advice to be able to help make a difference. I want to say thank you to Harper, which I've mentioned, particularly thank you to Simon, who has done so much work to make sure, well, I think we're on conference Mark 3 now, but make sure everything was going forward smoothly, so thank you very much indeed. To all my Morrisons colleagues who are here today, net zero and sustainable farming is something that happens on the side of the desk for everybody, but it doesn't mean to say it's a side thought. It's an absolutely integral part of the way that we're trying to think and work to have that overall sustainable farming. And again, the support of very many colleagues makes it so much more possible. But of course, lastly, and most importantly, thanks to all the farmers in the room as well. At the end of the day, we're not here at all ever to dictate what happens on farm, but we are here hopefully to help think about different ways that we can think about things going forward to make a more resilient industry. So without your feedback, without your input, of course, without your ability, a willingness to try and think about new ideas, we wouldn't be able to move forward at all. So I do really appreciate everybody's involvement, and I look forward to hopefully what will be a really interesting 2 days and have lots of exchange of ideas. But thank you very much, and I'll hand over to you to do the tech bit to get Michael online, I think now. So thank you very much.